Hello everyone, and welcome to this session of Live IELTS. I am broadcasting to you live from beautiful Budapest, Hungary, Central Europe. My name is Adrian, and I have a speaking lesson planned for you today, taken directly from our online course. This is course session 18. The speaking is the fourth section of the IELTS exam, and it's the final section of our course sessions. We'll be focusing on that this week. Of course, today is September 19th here, and our materials are coming from our websites. So for academic IELTS, check us out at www.aehelp.com, and for general IELTS, make sure to check us out and join at www.gieltshelp.com. I've also written those URLs up here for you so you can see them throughout the lesson and check them out at your convenience. Hello, everybody who's joining. Hi, Ramesh Reddy. Hi, Sandra Ali. Hi, Mariam D. Hi, Preeti Sinha. Hi, Priya Jayangu. Manisha Thakur. Good to see you in class. Hi, Sweta. Welcome, everyone. All right, and if you go to the Google Play Store, you can also download our app for free, Academic IELTS Help. Just search for that. Also look for our logo, and you'll find that there as well. You can get our books that we use in these classes, and these are full IELTS practice exams. They're original. They're the same difficulty as the Cambridge past papers. Same style, of course, following the structure of the official IELTS. You can check out our books on Amazon. If you are in India, Amazon India has them as well in electronic format. I'll just quickly show you that. I've not done that in the past. So this is what the covers look like. So if you're doing a search up here, you can see AE Helps Academic IELTS. Then you'll find these books. These are the ones we use in these live streams. If you're doing general IELTS, then look for GE Helps General IELTS books, and you'll find the similar type of cover, but it'll be green. So you can find our books on Amazon as well. And then, again, this is our websites. If you go to this one, aehelp.com, you'll see the blue background. It's Academic IELTS. When you log in, lots of videos, practice exams, interactive course for your phone, tablet, computer. If you're studying general IELTS, be sure to go to this website, which is with the green background, and that's at gieltshelp.com. Hi, Redcog. Good to see some more members joining in. Hi, Jeffrey. I see you've popped in there as well. Ola, back to you. All right. So let's have a look at today's material and get right into it with the IELTS speaking section. All right, I hope everybody's doing great. So let me introduce the speaking section of the IELTS. We're focusing on coherence, means we can understand the speaker or the candidate, being natural, and of course using some nice complex language. So IELTS, when they're marking your speaking scores, they're basically focusing on three main categories. One is the student coherent? That means, can I understand what they're communicating in response to my questions as the interviewer? Is the candidate's speech natural? Small part of that is pronunciation, but a big part of that is, does the student use similar kinds of sentences as native speakers in their everyday language, contractions, words used correctly, so on. We'll get into that. And is the student able to use some complex language? So can the student show me a range of grammar? Can they use present perfect, conditionals, adjective clauses in their speech to express themselves well? Now, these three parts, coherence, natural, and complex, they're not independent. You can imagine them as kind of joined together. So being complex, being natural, if you're doing that well, also means that you're being more coherent. The more coherent you are, the more natural, more complex you are. So there's a lot of connection among these three domains of the speaking evaluation. All right. So in this week's class, we'll be talking about the IELTS speaking structure. We'll discuss the test situation. I'll talk about some general strategies that you should practice at home before the IELTS and use during the IELTS. And then we'll get into some specific strategies for part 1, 2, and 3 of speaking. We'll be using some sample speaking dialogue throughout these classes, and we'll have some speaking quizzes for you as well. Now, of course, I can't hear you speak, but you can hear me speak. So very importantly, as we're going through the speaking section of IELTS, try to repeat me as much as possible. So when you hear me say a sentence, whether it's a question or a response, nice and loud, just repeat what I say. So try to make sure that you're in a situation where you can talk nice and loud, be comfortable, hear yourself. You might want to record yourself, so have your mobile phone ready or another recording device so you can record your speaking. Hello everyone who's joining, and good luck group on your September exam there. So repeat nice and loud. Don't be shy, okay, throughout. All right, so the speaking section structure. Now, the speaking section is divided into 3 parts. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. I'll explain that more in a minute. It takes about 12 to 15 minutes, okay? So each candidate has about 12 to 15 minutes one-on-one time with a trained IELTS examiner who is going to interview you, okay? And then when you go for your speaking, you have a specific time that you should be there. Make sure you show up early, 30 minutes to 1 hour early when you have that. And then you go into a room. It'll be a private room, and you will be asked several different questions. Part 1 will be questions on a general topic, such as hobbies, friends, entertainment, music, food. Even though it's a general topic, they can choose from a lot of different categories, which can have a lot of different kinds of questions. So don't try to memorize responses for these questions. Just know how to answer any question well. That'll take a few minutes, let's say 3-4 minutes for that. And then you'll be given a card. The card will be a small piece of paper, and it will have 4 to 5 questions. You will have 1 minute given to prepare your answers, think about your answers, write down some notes, and then you will have 1 to 2 minutes to speak, okay? And then part 3 will follow part 2. You'll give back the card once you're finished with part 2. And for part 3, the examiner will ask you another 5, maybe 8 different questions that are a little bit more detailed, a little bit more complex, and they will be connected in some way to the topic of your part 2 question, okay? So that's the basic structure of IELTS. It's very different, by the way, from TOEFL. If some of you are thinking about taking TOEFL, it's much more personable. It's much more like a real-life situation. You're speaking to a human. In TOEFL, you only speak to a computer. So some students find that part of TOEFL more difficult versus IELTS. Okay, so here is a sample of a speaking part 1. For now, let's just have a quick look at these questions, repeat some of these questions after me, and then we will come back to this and give answers which can get you a band 7 or more. But this is typically a part 1, so this is what the examiner is looking at for part 1. When you go into the interview room, the first question that the examiner will ask from you is to see your passport. You have to have identification so that the examiner knows that you are who you say you are, and then they will look at your passport or your national ID. They'll put it to the side. They'll make some notes on their paper that it is you. They'll match up your name with your candidate number. Then they'll ask you a couple of questions like, what is your full name? First, of course, introductions. So you can say, my full name is Adrian Benedek. Please just call me Adrian. Okay, so just repeat that after me again. So what is your full name, please? My full name is Adrian Benedek. Please just call me Adrian. There are more complex ways that you can say that, as some of our students have said before, like my given name is Adrian. My family name is Benedek. Please just call me Adrian. Okay? And then the examiner will ask you another 1 or 2 icebreaker questions just to make you feel a little bit more comfortable, less nervous. They'll ask you, are you currently working or studying? Then you can answer, currently I'm a student. I'm studying for IELTS. My goal is to get a nice high band score so I can get acceptance into a university of my choice so I can pursue my studies in psychology. Okay. I'll slow down a little bit. Don't worry if this is moving a little bit fast for you. And then the examiner will say, okay, I will ask you some more questions on a general topic. Let's talk about sports. Again, ladies and gentlemen, just repeat after me as I'm going through these. We're not worried about the answers right now. I'm just giving you an example of what kinds of questions they might ask. So, what kind of sports do you enjoy playing? What are some sports you have never played? Why? Do you prefer team sports or individual sports? Why? Why do you think people play sports? What is the most popular sport in your country? Why do people like this sport? Now, real quickly, you'll notice that a common question that pops up is this why? And some of you might remember this or know this from having children or having some young cousins or nephews, nieces. Little children ask that why question all the time. Humans, we're curious by nature. It's one of the interesting facts that makes us separate from the rest of the living world, other mammals, monkeys, is we are inquisitive. It means we like to clearly have an explanation for the nature of things in the world around us. So the why question is very important, and of course your answers should always give the reasons for your answers and examples, but we'll get into that a little bit more as we go along, okay? So, why questions are very important. The examiner might not always say why. You should always give the reason anyway. Children have an inquisitive mind, Castro, that's right, but so do adults. We just get a little bit shy to ask the why question because we don't want to look foolish. However, we do hide the question of why in a lot of our communication. Like, what's the reason you're doing that? Or what is that for? Same thing as why do you have it or why are you doing that? All right. So, next one, part 2. Of course, this is a giant card here that's being projected. In your real IELTS exam, this card will be about that big. It'll fit in your hand. It'll be passed to you face down by the examiner. And then the examiner, once they explain the instructions, they'll say, okay, now turn over the card, and your 1-minute preparation time begins now. And then you'll turn over that card, and on that card you'll see some questions, something like this. Describe a role model you have had in your life. You should say who the person is, his or her relation to you, what impact this person has had on your life, what makes them a role model. And then you have maybe the instructions on the card as well. You will have 1 to 2 minutes to talk about this topic. Now, these 4 or 5 questions are there to guide you. You should use the card, not just in the 1-minute preparation time. You should use the card in your speaking as well. Often what happens is students look at the card only when they're preparing. Then they forget to look at the card while they're speaking. And what happens is they forget to answer a question like that one. And the examiner knows that this question is on the card. And they'll say, well, that's a task incomplete. Your score is going down. You get to keep that card for all of part 2, okay? So after the preparation time, the examiner doesn't ask you to give the card back while you're speaking. They let you have that card for the whole 3 minutes. So make sure to look at the card. That's why they let you keep it. Make sure you cover all the questions, especially if you get stuck or if you feel like you've answered everything. That's a really good time to quickly take a peek at the card. Make sure that you didn't miss a question, okay? It's really important. And of course, not just the card, but also your notes. Okay, so make sure you use your notes. Suyanova is asking a question. If I don't answer, I'm not familiar with a few questions. what should I do? So what should I do if I don't answer all of these or if I'm not familiar with all of these? Well, definitely try your best. Focus on the questions that you do know. And make sure to give a complete explanation with some really good examples. And think about follow-up questions. So when you see this first one, who the person is, think about other types of questions like what is the person's history? Okay, so let's say that I'm talking about my father as my role model. I can explain that my father is a doctor. He worked hard all of his life. And then think about what is his history? Well, he was born in a small town in Ukraine. He grew up learning 4 languages. And you go into some more follow-up questions and details about the questions that you do understand. So if you do that, this is, again, answering that student's question. If you do that, there's a good chance that you might answer some of the questions that you didn't quite understand. So think about follow-up questions. These 4 or 5 questions on the card are there to guide you. It doesn't necessarily mean that all of the questions that you can answer are there. Don't go off topic. Okay, let me repeat that again. Don't go off topic. Make sure you're talking about that role model and how they influence your life. But think about additional questions that are related specifically to the questions that you understand. Hopefully you understand all of them. And then you should have no problem speaking for that 2 minutes, okay? Pian, good job on getting 7.5 on your speaking. That's not an easy task, okay? That means that you're a very good user of English language. Most native speakers, if they were to sit the IELTS exam cold without doing any practice or study, would probably score around 7.5 in the speaking section, okay? So 7.5 is a very, very good score. Pian, you should be proud of that. Okay, so that's part 2. Now, you're done with your 2 minutes of mini presentation. The examiner will stop you whether you're finished or not. Once the time is up, they'll say your 2 minutes is up. Please pass back the card, your note paper, and the pencil. Pass all that back, and then you're ready to go for part 3. Hi, Arcana. Good to see you in class. All right. So, speaking question, part 3. Again, it will be related to the topic of part 2. It's a set of questions that's a little bit more detailed, more in depth. It is testing for higher level students, so band 6, 7, 8, 9. And then you'll have some questions like this. Again, repeat after me, okay, nice and loud. What attributes should a good role model have? Why are role models important? Have you been a role model to anyone? What responsibilities does a role model have? Can having a role model be a bad thing? Why? So these are questions that in this situation could very well follow that part 2 card. Now, when you're doing this at home, and when you're practicing this at home, really good idea to practice speaking in partners, in classroom settings with tutors, teachers. Really good idea to record yourself on a device, listen back to yourself. And it's very important to practice the questions. So saying questions and not just answers, okay? Questions are one side of the coin, answers are the other. Often what I find is students focus too much on trying to say good answers and forget to actually practice questions. It's good to practice the questions so that you get a complete picture of the conversation and what you're doing. So it's good to be familiar not just from the perspective of the student, the interviewee, but also from the perspective of the examiner or the interviewer, okay? So make sure that you practice both roles when you're getting ready for IELTS, not just the role of the candidate, okay? It's really, really important. All right, so again, this is just a little bit of a review of what I've said before. The test situation for speaking, you sit in a private room, okay? It's done separately from the written portion of the IELTS exam. So the written portion you do in a room with other students. So there's a proctor that oversees that. It takes roughly about 2 hours, 50 minutes. And then the speaking is done separately. The speaking can sometimes be done on the same day as you do your sit-down exam, either in the morning before your exam or after your exam. It can also be done a day before or a day after, okay? So in many cases, students will have their written IELTS exam on a Saturday, and they'll have the speaking portion of the exam on a Friday. I don't think they put it on Sundays, but it can be that maybe your written part will be on a Friday and your spoken part will be on Saturday, okay? And yes, Arcana, that's very valid and true. You need to imagine that you're speaking to your grandma or your grandpa. You speak to them with respect. Your speaking must be loud, it must be natural, it must be coherent, and it must be complex. Now, speaking is a natural skill. We all have it. We all do it in our natural language as long as everything's working in our biology and we're healthy. But within the concept of speaking, there are a lot of different types of speakers, okay? There are people who are shy. There are people who are very confident. There are people who speak slowly. There are people who speak quickly. There are people who sometimes speak with some kind of a speech impediment, like a stutter or a lisp. So there are different variables that affect our speaking, and just like snowflakes, where no one snowflake is the same that has ever fallen or will ever fall on the earth, no one or no two speakers are exactly the same either. All of our speaking styles tend to differ from each other a little bit. Okay, so that's absolutely okay, and that's normal. It is important that you're aware of your speaking style. So if you're aware that you speak slowly, that's fine. Just make sure you recognize that and you use that to your advantage. If you're shy and you speak quietly, then for the IELTS, you really need to try to force yourself to change. Okay, you need to speak loud, natural, coherent. Oftentimes, in the IELTS speaking, they record your speaking interview, okay? And they record the speaking interview because students do have a chance to challenge their speaking scores or their other IELTS scores as well. And in that case, they will go back and listen to the interview from the recording. It will be listened to by another IELTS examiner, or maybe even two, and then they'll rescore or regrade the speaking. Rare cases, it can go up. Usually it stays the same, and sometimes it can even go down. So be careful if you challenge your IELTS score. Nevertheless, it is recorded, so if you're not speaking loudly, and it's hard for the examiner to hear you on the recorder, then it's going to be very difficult for them to give you a better mark, okay? So make sure you speak loud. If you have a shy, quiet voice, practice speaking loudly, okay? All right. So, again, just a little review there. Since it's recorded, have a clear, confident, loud voice. Now, you're going to be sitting at a table across from the examiner. So let's say that this little person here is the examiner. Okay. And here you are the examinee or the candidate. And you're sitting across from this person. Now, this diagram here is showing you the proper way to situate yourself during the speaking interview. You need to sit up straight. Don't slouch. Slouching means like this, okay, where your back is hunched. Don't slouch. Sit up straight. Keep your arms and your body posture open, Okay, it's very important. You think that, oh, maybe I'm just getting lost in details here, but it's actually very, very important to keep an open body posture. So notice that when I'm teaching you here, I'm projecting my voice. I'm speaking to you loud and clear, and I don't do this. So I don't teach the lesson like this with my arms crossed or dangling like this or in my pockets, and I'm not slouching while I'm teaching you. Because your body posture, your breathing, does have a significant impact on your communication, okay? If you cross your arms, and it's easy to do that in the IELTS speaking interview because you're nervous and you're defensive, you're protective. You're speaking a foreign language, potentially to a foreign person. You're being intimidated. It's a high-pressure situation. There's a lot on the line. It's easy for the body to be naturally defensive, which means it slouches, you cross your arms, and that's bad. Simple logic. If you have your arms crossed on your chest, you're putting weight on your chest. If you have weight on your chest, it gives added difficulty for your lungs to expand. That means your breathing is negatively impacted. And guess what? When we talk, we use air, we move air through our vocal cords to speak. And if I'm not breathing right, if I'm putting pressure on my chest, that's going to make my voice more quiet, more flat, more nervous. So don't do that, okay? Now, it's great and all that I just showed you this body posture and I explained to you the importance of keeping an open gesture or open body, but don't think, okay, hey, Adrian just told me this great, good information. I'm going to make sure to remember that when I pop into that speaking interview room, and that's what I'm going to do. No. You need to practice that. You need to practice that starting now. So the next time that you sit with your teacher, your tutor, your classmate, or even if you're doing practice over the internet like Skype or WhatsApp, make sure to right away pay attention to yourself, focus on your body posture, and practice every time that you're doing the speaking to have the correct body structure or the body alignment so that you can do well, okay? So that it's natural by the time you get to the IELTS, all right? Very important. Other things that are important are being hydrated, so having enough water in your system. The brain needs water and sugar to function well. If you're tired, fatigued, you haven't had enough to eat or drink, you haven't had enough sleep, these will negatively impact your speaking score. The same student, if they take the IELTS exam, they're well rested, they're well fed, they've slept well, they have an open body posture, compared to the same student who does not, closed body posture, fatigued, hasn't eaten well, an easy one-band score difference for the same interview session. So an easy one-band difference. So if you're wanting to push your score up by half a band or one band, just paying attention to these physiological adjustments can help you with that half to one band, okay? So pay attention to that. Now here is another really important slide for doing well with your speaking interview. The questions that you're going to see or hear during the speaking interview are very, very similar to a lot of the questions that you've seen 1,000 times in your ESL books and heard from your ESL teachers. And you've heard them many times, like, let's talk about your hobbies. What do you like to do in your free time? Do you like to play sports? And I know that these are the questions that a lot of English teachers throw at students regularly when they're learning. So by the time you're sitting in your 20th class for English and the 5th English teacher is asking you about your hobbies, you're starting to get bored and frustrated with that question. So you're starting to think, geez, how many more times in my life and while I'm learning English do I need to answer this question of let's talk about my hobbies? Well, yeah, I agree. It's not very exciting when you're being asked the same question over and over again. However, when you are in the IELTS speaking, it's a little bit different. Why is it different? Because you're there to prove your English level. You or your parents or somebody has paid a significant amount of money, close to $300 US, for you to sit in that test. How well you do in that test has a direct impact on important steps in your life, like going to university or moving to another country. So it's really, really important that you stay interested in the questions no matter what they are, okay? On our YouTube channel and in our forums on our websites, I've often seen comments from students saying, oh, these questions are boring, or I don't care about politics. Why do I have to answer these questions? Or I don't care about art. I never learned about art. I don't want to talk about this. Sorry, but you have to. The IELTS people don't know who you are, what you're interested in, what you're not interested in. They just have a set of questions to choose from, and they're going to ask you those questions. It's your job to become focused, have interest, make yourself have interest in your questions, and answer those questions like it's the first time you've heard them in English and you're super excited. What are your hobbies? Well, great, thanks for asking me. I have lots of hobbies. I love to collect stamps and coins. Last week, I bought a very rare stamp for $200. I've been hunting for this stamp for the last 5 years, and I'm so happy to have it in my collection, okay? I'm super excited to tell you that. So make sure to be interested. If you're not interested, it will be felt in your communication. It will come across as weaker communication, and you'll get lower band scores, okay? Ankush says, so what should be done in such situations when we don't know anything? Well, Ankush, if you don't know anything, you can't do anything, so not much. If you have or if the examiner asks you a question that you have no idea what it is, you can absolutely say, I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what you're asking me. Please ask me the next question. And you might have to do that once, hopefully no more, during the interview where you express that you're not clear on what the question is asking, so please let's go to the next question. It's much, much better to do that than to give some complete nonsense answer. 2 reasons. One, and this is important for your question, Ankush, if you give a completely nonsense answer that's off topic, has no connection to the question, you're just going to get minus marks, okay? The examiner has no idea if you just memorized something silly or clearly you don't understand the question, so you're just talking about whatever you can think of. So you're going to get minus points. 2, the second reason it's bad to do that is if you're giving an answer that has no relevance to the question, you're wasting time. Okay, the examiner has a very strict time limit for each candidate because on that day they will have 10 or 20 candidates and they have to interview all of them within the given time. So if you're wasting your time in your interview to answer a question that you have no idea about, then that's taking time from another question. So instead of doing that, just say, I don't understand that question clearly. Please let's move to the next question. Hopefully the next question is clear for you. You can give a good answer, and then you'll be picking up some points for that, okay? All right. So D. Nguyen says, my friend's examiner said he was off topic. Is that going to cost him a lot of points? Yes, it will. Absolutely. Unfortunately, D. Nguyen, in the speaking and in the writing, if you go off topic, it's impossible for the examiners to know if a student just memorized some speech or some text, and no matter what the question is, they're just giving that as the answer. Obviously, that's not proving any kind of language ability. That's just proving that the person can memorize a response. So they cannot give you marks. So bad news, yes, most likely your friend will be losing a lot of points if he's going off topic and not answering the question. Okay? So let's keep going here. So that's your attitude, okay? You have to have a positive, excited attitude about the questions, no matter what they are. Now, let's talk a little bit about natural speech. So what is this natural speech? I think a lot of students here get lost on pronunciation. So they think, well, natural speech means that I have to pronounce the words like a native speaker, I have to sound like a native speaker, and then I'm speaking natural. Well, yeah, it's a little bit true, but the pronunciation is not as important as most students think, okay? Very simple explanation for this. English is spoken by roughly 600 million people in the world as their first language, their mother tongue, and it's spoken at least an intermediate level by roughly 2 billion of the 7.5 billion people on Earth, okay? So there are a lot of native speakers of English, and there are even more non-native speakers of English. Among this huge group of people on Earth, there are a lot of different dialects, accents of English, okay? Irish English, Scottish English, West Coast North American English, Central North American, South Central North American, East Coast North American, different parts of England, Australian, New Zealand, and I could talk more and more. We all use English differently. In fact, sometimes we have trouble understanding each other if we have great differences in word use and pronunciation. So, your pronunciation does not have to be perfect, and it doesn't even have to be super clean, okay? Generally, people will say that West Coast North American and East Coast North American accents are the most crisp. I speak West Coast North American, so generally students say it's quite easy to understand. British accent a little bit more tricky depending on where it's from, okay? But it doesn't have to be crisp, clean, okay? You should practice, you should pay some attention to pronunciation, but don't get lost on pronunciation. The key here is, as long as the IELTS examiner can understand the word that you're saying, okay? So the word is clear, or it's easy to comprehend, more or less, then even if you have an accent, you have an Indian, a Punjabi accent, a Chinese accent, Cantonese, Mandarin accent, it's fine. You can still get a very high score. You can get band 8, even a band 9 with an accent if you're very good at using the English language, all right? So don't worry too much about the pronunciation, but definitely focus on some other important elements for natural speech. That's right, Jeffrey. Thanks for backing that up. As long as I can understand you, your pronunciation is fine. So here are some important points to pay attention to, okay? So natural speech in English, of course, is less formal and it's more flexible than the written English, okay? So Asif, I see you're asking a question there. Send me an email and I'll help you out, okay? So spoken language is a bit less formal and more flexible than written English, especially when you're using it in the academic or professional setting. Here are a couple of explanations, examples for that, okay? So in speech, we use contractions, okay? Contractions are basically where we take two words that are commonly used together in English and we push them together. So here you see I've, right? So I've comes from I have. And the example here in speaking is I've spent too much money in the last week. Just repeat after me. I've spent too much money in the last week. Now, in writing, you should not have this contraction. So in university or in business, we do not contract words. Instead, we write out the word. So I have spent too much money in the last week. Some other ones are like I'd, which is I would. Now, I encourage you to use contractions in your speech when you're practicing. Just make sure that they're clear, okay? So when a native speaker of English is using these contractions, we can hear them. So when I say I've spent, then my mouth is forming that B sound by closing. So I've spent. Okay? Make sure it's clearly audible. So make sure that the examiner can clearly hear that VE contraction when you're using it in speech. I actually recommend students to be a little bit exaggerative with their contractions. So when you're using contractions, don't just quietly go, I've spent too much money in the last week, but really put a stress on that VE. So I've spent too much money in the last week, okay? All right, so contractions, they increase your natural language in speech. Don't use them in writing. The second one here is using conjunctions like and, but, or, because to join your ideas together. When we're speaking, we often use these words like and, but, or, because to start our sentences. Okay, so somebody says, why did you spend a lot of money last week? And I can say, because I had to buy a new pair of shoes as well as a motorcycle so I could get to my new job, which is on the other side of town. Okay, so here I started my response with the word because. In speech, this is normal, it's natural, it happens all the time. However, in writing, we have some rules whereby we do not start sentences with words that join ideas or phrases. So in writing, we wouldn't generally start a sentence with the word and, okay? There is a tricky way to do it, but I don't want to confuse you and I don't want to suggest it. So for now, just avoid in your writing starting sentences with words such as and, but, or, because. It's awkward. It looks strange most of the time. It's incorrect most of the time. So avoid starting sentences in writing with those. However, in speech, absolutely, you can do that. Okay, so here's an example. And I went to the theater later with my friends. In writing, it would be much better as, in addition, my friends and I went to the theater later. It's more formal and it's correct in writing. It's less formal and it's correct in speaking. So that's part of your natural language. And as one of the students just commented, there are also natural fillers like and and Those are natural parts of speech. Big difference between speaking and writing. Speaking is happening real time. You have much less time to actually think about the content of the information. In writing, you have much more time, so it's easier to be formal and more clear. Okay? All right, we will talk about natural fillers a little bit more as well in a moment here. Oh, one really important note before we go to the next slide here. It's this blue box on the bottom. A little bit of an interesting note, and it's a very important one for your speaking score and for your success in the speaking section. Something that most of us do in our natural everyday speech when we're speaking to our parents, our friends, our relatives, others, colleagues, we often use the word you, okay? So when we're speaking, it's very common for people to use the word you incorrectly. So oftentimes in IELTS there will be a question like, what can you do at the park where you go every day? Okay, so again, just repeat after me. What activities can you do at the park near your house? And then often students will respond by saying, well, you can play sports. There's a big soccer field. You can also buy food. There's a couple of really good buffets that serve breakfast and lunch. Also, you can take part in some celebrations. Sometimes festivals are held at this park. That's not good. Okay, we do this in our daily speech because it helps us to hold the attention of our listener. So when we talk directly in second-person voice to our listener, and we say, you can do this, you can do that, you are, we are, then we're hoping that the listener feels involved and they're paying more attention to us. This is a natural psychology of human development and communication. And we do it all the time. And it's okay to do this in your everyday conversations. But on IELTS, it's absolutely a bad idea. Okay? First of all, your examiner is often coming from a very different context than you. Okay? They're often older than you. They might not even have the same national background as you. They might be visiting there just for work to do these exams from the UK or from some other part of the world. They come from a different cultural background. They might be a different gender than you. So they have a very different experience from you. And if you're talking to them like, you can do this, you are that, it's often very strange and really off mark, because the person's kind of thinking, well, I have nothing to do with that. I don't live near the park where you live, and I'm only here for 3 days while I'm doing this exam, and then I'm gone. So why are you saying you? It's not good, all right? So what should you do instead? Well, use the first person voice, so use I, okay? Say, when I go to the park, I can participate in festivals a few times a year as they're held in this park near my house. I can also buy some delicious food like breakfast or lunch. For instance, last week I bought a hot dog while walking through the park. It was delicious. And also I frequently play sports there with my friends. I played a good game of soccer or football with 3 of my good friends just last Tuesday. Much, much better communication. You're answering the question much, much more clearly, because the question was, what can you do in the park? Okay. And if it's not specifically you, what can you do in the park? Then use other nouns. Use other subjective nouns like people, individuals, people living in the neighborhood. Sounds much better. It's much, much better communication. Okay. Rahul, you're asking me, can I repeat a few words from that question? I'm guessing from the question that you're being asked. Absolutely. On IELTS, it's a good idea to use the question in your answer. Try to paraphrase it as much as possible, and definitely a good idea to use it. So if the question is, what can you do in the park near your house? You should say, well, in the park that's close to where I live, I can do several different activities throughout the week. Notice my paraphrasing, and I use the question. Okay, when I use the question and I paraphrase it as much as possible in my response, that will send my IELTS speaking band score skyrocketing upwards, especially if I give a good answer within that, right? Like I can eat some food, I can play sports, and so on. Absolutely. So use that question, Rahul, and paraphrase it. All right, so take note of that. You is not good. And avoiding the word you in your speaking takes practice, okay? The reason is we often do that in our everyday speech, in our own language or speaking another language. So it's really easy to fall into that trap of saying you, and you shouldn't do that, okay? So our next section here is the general speaking section, strategies, and we will get to that later. But for now, I'd like to just do a little bit of practice with you so you actually get a little bit of speaking practice in. So let's jump back to our question set here with part 1, and let's ask and answer some of these questions, okay? So let's go to this first one here. So you've introduced yourself, you gave your ID, you told the examiner that currently you're studying for the IELTS exam, and then the examiner says, what kind of sports do you enjoy playing? Okay, make sure you're repeating these questions and answers after me. It's very important. Okay, so what kind of sports do you enjoy playing? What's a good answer to this question? So I'll give you a chance, and I'll let you know if you're doing it right or not. So give me a nice full sentence answer to this question. Okay, give me a nice full sentence answer, and then we'll pick out the good ones, we'll practice them, We'll go through these questions a little bit together now, okay? So, let's see how you would answer this question. What kind of sports do you enjoy playing? Shabin, practice your speaking, okay? You can book mock IELTS speaking interviews on our website as well. What kind of sports do you enjoy playing? Amira, you say, I prefer to play cards with my nephew. I don't think playing cards falls into the category of sports, okay? When you see the word sports, you should think of something that's easily identified as sports, right? Playing cards is not really a sport. And you have to be careful with something like chess or billiards. Some people say it's a sport, or bowling. Some people say it's a sport. Some people say it's not. Choose something that nobody argues about, like tennis or basketball. Okay, Jeffrey, write that up again. I missed it. Rahul says, I play a lot of games, but particularly the best game that I like is basketball, which helps me stay in shape. Shanu says, I love to play badminton with my daughter as it is my favorite sport. Okay, that's not bad. It's a good start. Preeti says, I enjoy various kinds of sports like cricket and soccer. Preeti, that's a pretty good start as well. Ape says, I love to play sports in my free time, like cricket, volleyball, and badminton. But I love volleyball the most. That's an okay start as well. Most of these answers are a definite band 6.5, 7.5, maybe an 8, but there's a missing element to make it a 9. Urvashi says, well, I love outdoor sports activities, which involve a lot of running, like football and hockey. Urvashi, yeah, maybe. Hockey doesn't involve running. It involves skating. Careful with your verb agreement. It's not a running sport. It's a skating sport, and often it's played indoors, not just outdoors, right? I mean, in some cold places, there are outdoor rinks, so careful with that. Manisha says, well, there are 2 sports I really love to play, swimming and badminton. Both involves physical strength and fun. For example, last Sunday, I had a badminton match with my elder brother. Manisha, very good. You picked up on the missing element. You gave me an example. That's what most students were missing, is that example. However, Manisha, same thing. Careful with your verb agreement, okay? You love to play badminton and you love to go swimming or do swimming. We don't play swimming. Playing swimming is awkward and incorrect English. So be really careful with your verb agreements, okay? Some sports we play, some sports we do, okay? We don't play running, we do running, or we go run, okay? Careful about that. But that was the right idea there, Manisha, with the example following your actual response. Good paraphrasing there. So you can say something like this. I really like to play team sports, especially basketball and hockey. For example, last week, I participated in a great game of hoops. Now that's getting definitely into those higher levels when you know a slang way to paraphrase basketball is shooting hoops. So, for example, last week I participated in a great game of hoops and scored a few points for my team. Okay? Again, doesn't have to be super long. There is a little bit of complex grammar here with the especially basketball and hockey. So just repeat after me. I really like to play team sports, especially basketball and hockey. For example, last week I participated in a great game of hoops and scored a few points for my team. Coordinating conjunction. Like to play is a paraphrase of enjoy playing. So that will earn you a nice high mark. Doesn't have to be overly long, doesn't have to be overly complex. Good paraphrasing, clear, accurate answer, good verb agreement. Those are all great. Hi, Sarah. Good to see you in class. Hope you're paying attention to some of these points as well. Okay? All right. Let's hop back here to these questions again and look at a couple more. So here's a good one. What are some sports you have never played? Why? Okay, so please give me a nice answer to this question. What are some sports you have never played? Why? So what are some sports you have never played? Why? Okay, so think about that. Ahmed, sports not only refresh your mind, but also they help to keep you physically fit. It's a good idea. I'm just not sure which answer you're answering. I think it's maybe this one. Why do people think, or why do you think people play sports? That would be good for that one, Ahmed. But let's focus on this one, which is what are some sports you have never played and why? Okay, let's try to focus in on this question and give a good answer that would score you band 8, band 9, no problem. All right. So Mehak Dylan says, I never play badminton because I am not interested in it. Not interested in it. Now, Mehak, couple of mistakes. It's a simple sentence. Okay, that would probably only earn you about a 5, 5.5 at most. Couple of important mistakes. Number one, this sentence is present perfect. Have never played. This is a present perfect grammar structure. Your answer has to show me the same present perfect grammar structure, okay? So I never played badminton is not present perfect. It's not reflecting the grammar. Immediately you're losing points. Also, the grammar mistake, I do not interest in it, is awkward, incorrect English. It has to be I'm not interested in it. More natural, simply I'm not interested in it, okay? So that would be much better. Jeffrey, I have never played golf because I don't have enough money for all the gear and the memberships to use the field. Very good, Jeffrey. So you're answering the question, you're answering the why, very good, and you're showing me the present perfect grammar have. Now, if you want to be even more natural, have that contraction, right? So instead of saying I have, use I've. I've never played golf because I don't have all the money for the gear and the green fee. That's actually the correct term for playing golf. It's a green fee, okay? Green fee. It's the cost of playing on a golf course, okay? You're playing on a golf course, 9-hole or 18-hole golf course. Raghu Raman says there are, oh, sorry, I missed it, Raghu. Rahul Monga says there are a plethora of games that I haven't played, especially martial arts, or I haven't done, especially martial arts, which are very dangerous and lead to injuries. For example, one day I tried martial arts with my friend and I got injured. I decided never to do it again or any other physical contact sport. Okay, good. Preeti says, generally, I have. Okay, again, Preeti, Sinha, make sure that present perfect. Generally, I've played all kinds of games, but I don't play badminton because when I was a child, I got injured and I gave up on the sport. Now, careful, because it's you have never played. So if you say something like I played it once, you're not actually answering the question well. It's not completely coherent or accurate because you have played it. You've played it once, all right? So, Shahar says, I've never preferred playing indoor sports as I am aggressive and I like to burn my energy mostly by doing activities outside. Okay? Shahar, that's not a bad answer. Just make sure you don't start focusing on what you do like to play instead of answering the question, which is what you never play or never have played. Okay? Miriam says, I've never played wave surfing because I think it's dangerous. For example, my uncle broke his leg doing it, so I never want to try it. Miriam, it's okay. Again, verb agreement. You don't play wave surfing. You do wave surfing, okay? So certain activities you do, you don't play them, okay? Mitu says, I've never played hockey because in my childhood I had a head injury, and so my memories with it, and sorry, it's gone from the chat, so I can't see the rest of it. Abe says, mostly I've play every sport when I get a chance, but I've never played sports which require special techniques or facilities like boxing or tennis. Good. I'll get you guys back on screen here. Just give me a moment. All right. Shanu just posted again, and I'll read it, okay? There's quite a few answers being posted, which is great, but it also means that I have to be quick to catch some of them. So Shanu, just post it one more time, and I'll try to catch it, all right? Suyanova says, I've never tried playing badminton myself because I'm not good at this sport. I think it's a bit boring for me from what I can see. Additionally, it's not very popular in my country. Suyanova, it's pretty good. Mostly you have a good answer. Just note those corrections that I gave you there, okay? All right, let's do one more. Do you prefer team sports or individual sports? Why? Okay, so give me an answer for this one. Do you prefer team sports or individual sports? Why? Now, ladies and gentlemen, if I don't catch your response, don't be shy. Don't give up. I'll probably catch your next one. I always try to look at different students' responses. So just keep answering, okay? It's good practice, even if I miss it, all right? So I'll keep reading them. Okay, so now answer this one. Do you prefer team sports or individual sports? Why? Sarah, that's for the previous question. I have never played cricket because I have no idea about its rules and regulations, and it just seems like too much of a commitment for me to learn it at this point. Okay, it's good, Sarah. A little bit more explanation would be good there, all right? All right, Azine Awa, you said, I've never played tennis on grass because I'm not good at the sport, and also I could injure someone. Lawn tennis, I haven't heard of. I do know that we play tennis on 3 different types of courts. One of them is lawn or on grass. I don't think you need to specify that, but maybe I'm not familiar with some different sport that's called lawn tennis. All right, so Rahul says, for this question, do you prefer team sports or individual sports? Rahul says, I prefer to play team sports because it teaches us valuable lessons like team spirit and coordination. Instead of coordination, Rahul, I would go with cooperation. Okay, so go with cooperation. All right. Shanu says, I prefer team sports as it increases team spirit. Shanu, that's a good start. You definitely need to do more though, okay? Yeah, it's an incomplete answer. You need to give me a little bit more. Again, this is a question where you really should include an example as well, all right? Murasa says, I'm in favor of team sports compared to individual sports because playing on a team is a joint victory, or it helps to win more often through cooperation. Murasa, the second half of that explanation is a little bit awkward. I understand what you're trying to say, but you want to rephrase it, okay? Joey Maluto says, I'm fond of playing team sports. When I was in college, I participated on several teams, the college basketball team and football team. So I can confidently say that team sports are positive as they build trust, cooperating with other team members. Okay, Joey, I gave you some corrections there as well. Pay attention to that, okay? Uphay says, mostly I prefer team sports because that gives more enjoyment through communication with team members and encourages advantages for success in life like cooperation and sympathy. So sympathy would be a good replacement for that last term. All right, so those were all some great answers. You can also choose the other side. I challenge you to try answering individual sports. So I'm in favor, notice the contraction. I'm in favor of playing team sports as it is more enjoyable to celebrate victories with other team members than alone in individual sports. I really, or you can even say, as I mentioned, I love to play basketball, or I love to shoot hoops and play hockey. Okay, last week there was excellent camaraderie on our basketball team, which made the game really fun. Okay, camaraderie means working together for a common goal. Camaraderie. There we go. So this is a nice response here. It paraphrases the question. It combines some compound, complex grammar as well. Again, just repeat after me. I'm in favor of playing team sports as it is more enjoyable to celebrate victories with other team members than alone in individual sports. As I mentioned, I love to shoot hoops and play hockey. Last week, there was excellent camaraderie on our basketball team, which made the game really fun. Example of my enjoyment for team sports, really nice connection to my previous response. So there's good cohesion in my communication. I'm in favor of playing team sports. I'm using an expression in paraphrasing, as it is more enjoyable, using some nice compound grammar structure there. That will get you a high band score. So that's solid. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your participation. I've seen some wonderful answers there, and I can see that the more you're learning through the class, the better your answers are getting. You're paying attention to including these contractions, making your sentences complex, compound, connecting information among questions, good cohesion, adding in examples to your explanations. Keep it up. Remember, practice at home. Practice your posture, the way you sit, your body language. Practice enunciating, projecting your voice, being a powerful communicator. Okay, so those are all steps that you need to practice. We're born with the ability to communicate well. As long as we practice it, we can get there. So thank you so much for watching today. Tomorrow's class, we're going to continue with some really good general strategies for the speaking section. We'll take some more sample questions, go through those, same time. I hope everybody had fun, more or less, as much as you can during an IELTS lesson. I wish you good studies, good rest if it's late in your country, beautiful dreams if you're going to bed. Much love to all of you. Bye for now. See you tomorrow.